very special guest today that I'm very excited about. It's Patrick Foote from Name Explain on YouTube. I know this is strange because I know that your name is Patrick, but I keep wanting to call you Matthew for some reason. And I don't know why that is. Like, I just kept in my mind, you were, Matthew Foote, Matthew Foote, Matthew Foote. And I'm like, wait a second.
Very odd. So, like, I mean, that's already an interesting name kind of based conversation, how, like, we associate people with specific names and how, like, some people we just link that must, maybe I look like a Matthew to you or something, and you just look at me and think, oh, he's called Matthew. You can't get out of your head.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I was hoping that you'd be like, oh, that was the name that I was originally called or something. Like, I've touched into something in the universe, but no, it's just my weird brain.
I was almost given the name Gabriel, I was told as a kid. But I was almost Gabriel, but my parents decided on Patrick instead. So if you had Gabriel, you would have been close.
So thank you so much for being here today. I'm just very excited to talk to you. You have well over 300,000 subscribers on YouTube, and you've got 3 books. I've listened to your one on Audible because I love listening to books. It's called The Origin of Names, Words, and Everything in Between. And you have correctly said that listening to your content is like being on an etymological safari. I love it so much. Like, you would think, it's a name book, explain the origins of names. Like, how interesting could that be? But you've done such a good job of, like, unpacking how were coconuts named? Like, they were literally named after ghosts. That's crazy.
Well, that's kind of one of the reasons I kicked off Name Explain, to talk, just because so many of the words we use come from such fascinating sort of origins. And I just thought, we need to talk about this. Someone needs to be talking about this. I thought, well, no one else is, so I might as well do it. Obviously, there are a lot of other people out there talking about etymology and word origins, but I just wanted to have a little nook of the internet for myself, which then manifested into, there's currently 2 books out, The Original Names, Words, Everything, volumes 1 and 2, and a 3rd book is on the way, which is on a different subject matter, but I won't talk too much about that one. I'll talk more about that when it's close to being released. But
I'm so glad that you did that. I love listening to your content so much. It's so enjoyable. It's like all of these amazing little facts that will, like, make you a lot cooler in a conversation, but but in, like, a conversation of cool facts, because you and I were chatting before this that you can't just talk names with everybody.
No, a lot of people really don't care all that much.
That's a niche.
I always like to say a lot of people don't care yet. Like, I think some of the stuff I've researched over the almost 9 years I've been doing Name Explain now on YouTube, there's so many interesting facts, and like, kind of thing I go is everyone has a name. There's kind of something everyone's going to be interested in. If you're a massive nerd, you'll want to know about, like, names of countries and cities, but even things like sports. Like, I think, like, nerds and sports often see as polar opposites, but, like, sports teams' names are really fascinating as well. There's something for everyone with etymology, and that's kind of what I try to convey with my content.
Yeah, there's a real power in it, and I think, my niche has been in the world of helping people name babies.
That's a hell of a thing. That's like the most important name, I guess.
It's fun, but names are so much bigger than just a parent's brief moment of panic of having to name a human being. Like, they're so powerful and so rich in history, and I just really enjoy finding out the origin of words and names. Like, I just think that's so fun, and how that's still a continuing process. Like, words and names are still being created.
Totally. There's always words being added to the dictionaries over time. There's always, like, new words. I think that aura is a word that's really popular at the moment. There was a Riz, like, last week or something. Demure is really popular. I don't know when this podcast is going out, so that might be outdated by the time it is released. But, like, there's always, like, a new word, and it's expanded greatly thanks to social media, TikTok, X, Twitter. Still call it Twitter, screw X, Facebook, that sort of thing. And we're just constantly having this, like, constant just barrage of new words being bomb. This is what we're being talked about. I'm like, okay, well, what does this mean? What does that mean? How important is this really going to be? Like, and I just find that interesting. Well, it's this constantly evolving, expanding thing. We don't really even control it. Like,
yeah, it's true. I mean, words, the cool words that all the cool kids are using are just trends in fashion, and names are just words that we've assigned to people.
And that must be something you come across in regards to names and trends. Like, names are always coming in and out of trends and fashions. It's been a lot of like the 20s names I've noticed recently have been really popular with babies. I regularly check here in the UK, the Office of National Statistics release like every year a document saying like these are the most popular baby names in the UK and Wales, in England and Wales. And are constantly interested in what names are rising up and rising down. So that must be something you've noticed as well in your working life.
Yes. So the same thing here, the Social Security Administration, I think the Sunday after every Mother's Day or something like that, they release the year before statistics. And that's like the namer community's Christmas. Everybody, nerd alert, we all wait just for that list to be published. And we're just like going through it because it's so fascinating. Because names are such depictions of fashion.
I think what's interesting is how like a name that can seem old-fashioned, like for all my life, there's been sort of certain names linked with the older generation. And it'll be like, for example, my granddad was called Reginald. And like that seems like such an old-fashioned name. Like, why on earth would there be a baby Reginald? I can't even envision a baby called Reginald. And now it's kind of come full circle. Oh no, I could. It's just about like, I could see that becoming trendy. I don't know if like even just Reggie, that could be like, or just Reg. I don't know if you know yourself, but is that sort of name on the rise again? Because for me, for so long, it's been an old person name. But these things are always cylindrical that it could easily come around again.
So namers have coined this thing called the 100-year cycle.
Oh, that's fascinating.
You come in for about 10 or 20 years, and then as it starts to become a parent name, it loses its cool. And at the tail end of being a grandparent, it comes back in.
Yes.
And I think it's because so many people want to honor their grandparents that becomes a 100-year cycle.
That is so fascinating. I've often like mused on that myself, how like parent names aren't cool, but grandparent names are cool. And I think it does come from a lot of people who do want to name their kids after grandparents. That's so, because I've got friends who are starting to have sort of children now, and some of them have sort of named them in honor of grandparents, or even their middle names or first names, things like that. Like, oh yeah, that does make sense. So those sort of names will be coming back. That's so interesting. I think, and in regards to other popularity things, because I've done a whole series of videos solely on first names called Fun with First Names. I retired it recently, but it was really fun to just literally find a single name and talk about it for like 10 minutes or so. Find out everything.
That's easy to do.
Yeah, totally. And it's often like, why did this name, like there's lots of names that spike in popularity, and it can often be attributed to like one famous person, because that's all it takes. You get one person, one like notable person with that name, and then a couple parents do it, then a couple other parents say, oh, that's a cool name, I might use it. And it's just fascinating how that a surge of popularity can stem from one notable person.
Well, I think it's because if you look at it as fashion, the celebrity type people are the trendsetters, because they like the normal population, the average person has this kind of a comfort zone, but people who are celebrities are a little bit outside of that. Like their comfort zone is wider. And so they'll start using things outside of the normal comfort zone, but then that stretches the average comfort zone. So like 10 years ago, if somebody had named their kid North, we'd be like, wow, they need to simmer down. But now it's an average name, because a celebrity had to use it first to make it not. It's weird at first, but then it's not weird because we're talking about it and it's become a part of our language and our culture. So that takes the weirdness out of it. I just find that so fascinating. You know, there'll probably be children called Demure. You know?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if you're just saying Demure, it does have like a nice name ring to it a little bit. But then, like on the opposite end of that spectrum, there are names that I don't know if you feel like names that probably don't have any chance of coming back. And we mentioned this when we were messaging each other before doing this podcast. I said about the name Karen and how like the image, the name Karen, and it really sucks. Like, my heart goes out to anyone named Karen.
It does.
I hate it.
I have a whole sermon I could talk about with that. It makes me so mad.
And like when I meet someone called, or when I hear a friend of mine say, "Oh, they're being a Karen," I'm like, don't do that. Like, there's such such an undercurrent of even an undercurrent of misogyny linked to it, and it's just not on. And like, just to throw this whole people with this name under a bus because their name has been linked with a certain kind of image, it sucks. Really sucks. And do you think Karen has any chance of coming back?
So it's interesting. I feel so thwarted because 2019 and early 2020, I started like shouting from the rooftops, you guys need to start thinking about the name Karen because it's super cute AF. I mean, I don't know if in England you've watched like the original Frosty the Snowman.
Yeah, the cartoon.
Yeah, like the OG Frosty, and the cute little girl in there is Karen. And she's so cute. I'm like, she's the perfect name to start ushering back in because she's just on the cusp of being on trend again. And Karen is so sweet. And then 2020 happened, and people just hijacked that from me. And I was so mad. I love the name Karen. I think it's going to be a while. Before people will start entertaining that name again, which makes me very upset.
Yeah, and I hope it does fine. Like, it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of damage control to kind of get it back in to the world of acceptable needs. But I think it's not the only one. I think like Kevin in Germany has that connotation to it as well. Oh,
interesting. Yeah. The male version of Karen here in America is Chad.
Chad,
okay,
yes,
Chad.
Yeah, Chad's got this fascinating. It is somewhat Karen, but this is going on a bizarre tangent. There's kind of like this. I don't know how much you look into like there's like the manosphere, which is kind of this section of the internet, primarily online, which is all like very toxic masculinity, and it has like things like incels in it, and they have this term of Chad themselves, which kind of has come into normal memedom. I'm gonna coin the word memedom just then, like kingdom memedom.
Yes.
And Chad has picked up this connotation as being like the cool guy who gets all the girls, and that's an issue unto itself. Then names like Stacy and Becky have been hitchhiked, kidnapped, hijacked. I was like, hitchhiked, hijacked. It took me a while to get there. We'll keep that in. It's fine.
Hey, we're cool. Pick us up.
Yeah. They've been hijacked by this sort of really unpleasant community online. And these names like Becky and Stacey and Chad have all been sort of taken on and just sort of have really unpleasant connotations to them, too, used by these people to stereotype entire groups of people behind this one name. And that's something that upsets me as well.
Yes. Yeah. The thing that I have discovered about the internet is these black holes that are just awful places to go. So I don't go there. And people who go there, it's like who have opinions from being there. Like, I'm just not interested in that opinion. It's a terrible one.
Yeah. And sometimes, even if you avoid these black holes, I've noticed they come to you. Like some of the stuff I get on Facebook and Instagram on my algorithm or on my explore page. So why am I seeing this? This is some really unpleasant stuff. Like, oh, go away from it. That's just something. That's quite, it's quite a big name-based tangent. But I was sort of saying to you, I really enjoy sociolinguistics, like how we use language in society, especially with names. I just find that absolutely fascinating. But as for etymology as a whole, like, I just think it's great. And like, in regards to the etymology of names, like first human names, there's some really interesting ones out there. I'm trying to put some of my favorites right now. And what I find really fun is some of them have quite like unpleasant meanings as well. I think something like Calvin means bald or like big nosed. Some of them have really odd, unfortunately, I'm not a walking etymology encyclopedia. A lot of it is like stuff I just...
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's bizarre. I mean, the name Portia means pig, and you're like, well, Portia sounds like the most gorgeous name, like the name of a goddess, and then its meaning is pig. Like, how? What?
It's interesting. When I hear the name Portia, I think of the Cars, and it's completely different spellings. But I think of the Cars.
I think of Portia de Rossi.
Oh, is she Arrested Development?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
But funny fact, she changed her name to that. She was born like Amanda something.
Oh, she wanted to change it up. Well, I think that's something really interesting worth talking about as well, like the idea of name changing. Because I think you were saying how like a name, you were saying how your whole business is about giving parents names for their kids, and like names are such a clear identifier to us. They're probably our most important identifier. And we don't really have that much control over them. Most people get named by their parents. I think there's some rare occasions in which I think I've read some of that. There's a celebrity couple who like let their kid name themselves by the time they could talk, and even less people. And you can legally change your names in most parts of the world, but many people don't, especially their first names. It's just shocking how this is something that's so unique to you, something that like is your key identifier. Like we get to pick what hair color we have, we get to pick what clothes we wear, all these things that identify us, but we have so little control over our own names.
Yeah, I think that it's very fascinating. It's a messy line to walk, because you have this person that is coming from you, that is linked to this heritage, and you're wanting to honor this person with a name that means something. But then when they become an adult, you also have to be in this place where you don't take it personally if they want to let that go. And it's a journey.
That must be. So this is something definitely to ask yourself, because you work much more with because even though I talk about names a lot, I very rarely interact with the actual dealing with the names of specific people. I kind of talk about them much more broad strokes. But I've always found the whole sort of fascination of passing on first names, especially on the male side of families, like Michael the Second, Michael the Third. We have it here in the UK. We're currently on our third Charles. But I wonder if have you had anyone come up to you and be like, "Oh, I was named after my dad and I'm not happy about it," or like a parent saying, "Oh, we want to name them the same as the dad's name," or even like, is there any cases of a daughter getting her mum's name? Because that doesn't happen anywhere near as much as on the male side.
I think that it definitely happens. It happens more. I think it's more noticed on the male side because males are they pass it on so literally. But you have the name Sarah, and there's Sadie and Sally and other Sarah derivatives to honor Sarahs. So you have these female names that get passed along, and then they're called something different, and then that has become its own name. But names like Margaret and Mary and Sarah, and even with John, with Jack, you're like, how did we get Maggie and Etta and Pearl from Margaret? But they're all linked back. And Mary, how do we get Molly from Mary? It's so interesting.
I think I might be able to explain some of those, if you don't mind.
Go for it. You're the name.
Margaret's ultimate origins, I think, comes to either the Latin or Greek word for pearl.
Yes.
And as for Peggy from Margaret, that comes from Margaret becoming Meg, which is kind of taking the M and the Greta, that sounds like Magretti, like Meggie. Yes. And then it often comes from it's the same way. I can't remember its exact name, but it's quite like a London Cockney sort of thing, where you rhyme a word but change the first letter. It's kind of how it's how Richard became Dick. It's the same story as that. Obviously, Dick has a very different connotation to it, which I want to say, I think that's really unfair. I think Dick is a really fun first name.
It is. I think it's going to take a long time for a woman to be okay with calling her son Dick.
Yeah, I think it's such a nice, sharp little sound. Like, "Hey there, Dick."
It's very cute. It's very cute.
It really is. Yeah, it really is. Even a name like unfortunately, it has a negative connotation, which is very unjust. But a name like Gay or Gaynor, I think that's a really pretty name as well. But it's completely unwanted. There's nothing wrong with being gay. There's nothing wrong with the word gay. Yeah. But unfortunately, that's got a bit of a stigma behind it as well. And I think that's a really pretty little name as well. It
is. I think that if you were, because gay used to be used, but if you look at old poetry, it's everywhere, which I think is beautiful. But if you named a kid gay today, they'd say, is their brother straight? You know, like it's so, yeah. But it's gone from being a name right now to being a descriptor. So for the layman, who is not a nerd like us, what is etymology and what is sociolinguistics?
Oh, yeah, we should actually talk about that. So etymology is the study of word origins. It's not entomology. That's the study of insects or bugs, creature crawlies, whatever you want to call them. Two very different things. Sociolinguistics is, so going back to etymology, etymology can cover everything covered. Nouns, names, verbs, adjectives, anything like that. And every word has an origin of some degree. We might not know it because some words are super ancient. That's like a word like water. We can look into how water got its name. But it's such a basic concept. Even a word like mother, that it's very similar across a huge selection of language, mother, like mama. And we don't really know exactly where it comes from because it's such an old, primitive concept. These older concepts tend to have etymologies of much more obscure origins. With mother, we think it comes from babbling, like when one of the first things kids do when they acquire language is they go ba 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 ma 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 ma. And obviously they aren't actually, like a lot of kids, their first word is dada, and they're not really saying this is when I meet new parents, I have to not be evil and be like, oh yeah, your kid's not really saying mama or dada. They have no idea what they're saying. We've just instilled that meaning onto those nonsense babblings we've given them. So that's where we think mama comes from. And because all babies, regardless of language around the world, babble in the same way, that's why the word mother is similar in so many languages. Sorry, that's a massive tangent, but a lot of more newer words, and by newer I mean like for antiquity, from the time of Rome and whatnot, they have got much more traceable origins, and people way above my pay grade, way more actual etymologists. I'm more or less a professional Googler at this point. I just Google the answers and hopefully make them a bit more presentable for viewers and readers. Have gone to great lengths to figure out where these words have come from by looking at connections with other words, suffixes and prefixes used in them, see what connects with what. And they kind of figure out where these words come from. And of more recent names and words have really easy etymologies to deduce. I'm trying to think of a more recent one. Something even as simple as like New Zealand, the country of New Zealand. That name simply comes from the fact it was the new version of Zeeland, the province in the Netherlands, because the Dutch were the first Europeans to sight New Zealand. They definitely weren't the first there. The Maori were there for a very long time before them. And they're like, oh, it's kind of like the Zeeland province in our country, so let's just call it New Zealand. And Zeeland, obviously the original Dutch Zeeland simply means sea land. So that one's pretty self-explanatory. So the more recent we get in regards to etymologies, the more clear they are. But that's what etymology is, more or less. And then in regards to sociolinguistics, I don't really get to talk about it as much as I'd like to, but it's one thing it's like the main part of language I'm really interested in. And it kind of deals with how we use the language in a society, the connotations we have for names like Karen, and the words we use and how we talk to other people. Things like upwards and downwards correlation. That means, so if I'm boring you, please just say if this is really boring.
I'm loving this conversation. You're not boring me at all.
That's good. Hopefully the other listeners aren't bored at all. So I believe it's called upwards and downwards correlation. I might be wrong. It's been a long time since I've been in an actual language class. So upwards correlation and downwards correlation they relate to how we speak to other people and how much we may talk in the same way they talk to us. A great example of that, and this is really stereotypical, it's not always the case. Often, like when I have workmen or traders in my house fixing a leak or whatever, this is really broad strokes, but they tend to have somewhat more, how can I put this nicely, more sort of working class way of speaking, an accent and whatnot, use more colloquialisms, more sort of casual stuff like that. When I talk to them, because I want to be in their good books, because they're fixing my house, I would probably upwards correlate to speak more like them, be like, oh, do you want a cup of tea as well? Because that's kind of how they talk. We want to get along with them. So we talk like that, whereas with downwards correlation is the opposite. It's when someone speaks to us and we don't really want to be associated with them as much. So we talk in a more different way. For example, this is kind of a funny one as well. If someone has a really posh accent, oh yes, how do you do? My gut instinct, this voice says more about me than anyone else. My gut instinct is to be as unposh as possible, kind of just to annoy them, I guess. So I would downward correlate to be like, oh yeah, I'm all right, mate, thanks yourself. Just to kind of, I don't know, that's probably more my issue, but it's that sort of thing. It's things we do. One of the great things of language and linguistics is we do really incredible things when we talk, and we're not really taught it. And a lot of people don't even know it's a thing. Like, you probably upwards or downwards correlate all the time. But so did people listening, probably didn't even know it had a term, or didn't know it was something they were subconsciously doing. I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, that is. I think that, words and names are like an excavation. And it's so layered. Like, where we are today is built on so many layers. And I think that's why I love these conversations and to listen to your content, because it's kind of drilling up through the layers and saying, have you ever wanted to know where like this little thing comes from?
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. The way back. Yeah. It's so important.
And likewise with sort of sociolinguistics and names, it's more than just the name Karen that has an image to it. Another example is the name Tiffany. We associate Tiffany as being this really modern name. I'm sure you know this one anyway, you're not in agreement. But it's from like the Middle Ages. I think there's evidence from like the 16th, 15th century of Tiffany's being around. But I thought there was probably one specific Tiffany. I think it might have been the singer Tiffany from the 80s. I think she kind of like became associated with the name so much that we kind of got this image that it's like this young, trendy it girl, California Valley kind of image to it. And I think that's really fascinating as well.
There's something that namers have coined called the Tiffany effect, where names feel like they're locked in an era, but they're not from that era at all. So like Tiffany, to me, if you said, Alex, what's the quintessential name of the 80s? I'd say Chad and Tiffany, you know?
Yes, yeah.
And it's so old. It's such an old name that to name somebody Tiffany today feels very trendy or a little, I don't want to say uncool, but like trendy but not untrend at the same time. And yet it's just as powerful a name as Sophia and Isabella. Yeah. Which is fascinating to me. So in your book, you said that you are fascinated by ancient words that are still used today. Do you have any favorites?
One I wrote that book quite a long time ago now, so I'm like, I did say that in the book. Like, yeah, maybe I said that.
Yes, I did.
I said that, definitely. I think a really great example is often it's like elements of words that appear in like ancient element appear in modern words, and I don't know how popular this is state-wise. If I said a cobweb, is that?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you use cob?
What?
Do you use cob as in like a spider's web? You call it a cobweb?
Yes. Yeah. We say all the time. Yeah.
So cob is just a really old English word for spider.
Oh, really? So a cob over here is a corn cob. We just call them spiders or daddy long legs with cobwebs. So if you're saying cob, I'm like, wait, what does corn have to do?
Corn, of course. Yeah, no.
Okay, interesting.
I wonder if there is a connection between a corn on the cob and a cob spider. I don't know for sure. I have to look into that one.
That's interesting. Maybe the husks look like legs or something.
Yeah, and like while no one really calls a spider a cob anymore, most people still say cobweb without even really thinking about it.
Oh, interesting. I was this many years old when I realized it's a cobweb.
I guess it could be like a cob's hyphen. No, cob's a web, a cob's web, the web of a cob. But no one. I think spider unto itself, it sounds quite I'm making this up. It sounds quite French. I imagine that might have been one of the words that entered English through like 1066, the Norman invasion. Spider. I might be making that up completely. I'm not entirely sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if one of the old English words that kind of got butted out once that happened in English. Another great one is werewolf. The were was just kind of a word for man, because it just means man wolf.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And while we no longer say where, we don't call a man a were anymore, we still use it in this one term of werewolf.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So, where was just another word for man?
I think so. Yeah, like I said, it's been a while since I researched all this sort of stuff, but I think feel free to put any kind of notes in the podcast saying Patrick is a complete liar. Don't listen to a word he says.
I'm going to do that.
That's fine with me. Just don't.
Podcast is full of lies.
I talk, we put a disclaimer up saying none of that's true. Just ignore him. Just let him have his moment. Let him just rant around about names for a bit, and get him some sort of sense of approval from internet strangers. Then let him be on his merry way.
I'm gonna enter your name as Matthew Foote anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no one will find me anyway. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. But no, talking about some more ancient words I really enjoy. My favorite word ever is melancholy. I just think it's got a lovely sort of sound to it. And even though it's not a name, it's an adjective. I don't know how long that dates back from, but a lot of words do date back quite some time.
Yeah, melancholy is such a beautiful word. And it kind of, like, you say that and you know it, even if you didn't know what it meant, you would feel what it meant somehow. It just embraces that feeling so well.
Yeah. I also really enjoy, like, how can I explain it? 2-syllable words with quite a strong second syllable, like powder. I just like that word, powder and launder. They're two words I really enjoy. They've got a nice texture to them.
Yes. Well, it's funny even with, names and words across different cultures, because we're both speaking English, but we're two totally different types of English.
Totally. The way it's spoken to the way it's spelled.
I heard, should I call you British or English? Because if I say English, people are going to think that I'm talking about us Americans. But I heard an English person say tattoo. Oh, I got a new tattoo. And we just say tattoo. Like, hey, nice tats, bro. Yeah, it's my tattoo. And you're like, oh, look at my new tattoo. And tutus are different things over here than tattoos.
And a really interesting one is the TU sound. So if a word begins TU in British English, so it is known as British English, what I'm kind of speaking, I guess, it makes a ch sound. So like we would say YouTube.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, YouTube. Like that's how most people would say it. Say YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah, like that's in American English, that's like the standard, where for some weird reason the TU sound in British English, I want to say when it starts a syllable, which I guess would be in most cases, it makes a ch sound. YouTube. I can't think of other ones, but none are coming to mind right now. But yeah, that's a really interesting little different way of spelling, like different way of pronunciations, different words entirely. Talk about all different fruits and vegetables with different names. Like you guys say zucchini, we say courgette. I'm trying to remember some other. Yeah, did you know that one?
That's insane.
Yeah. So what you guys have as a zucchini is a courgette over here, which I think must come from French. Courgette. It sounds too French not to be French.
Yeah, if you were over here and you said courgette, we would think you just said Corvette wrong.
So do you know what we call eggplants?
No.
It's a name I want to say. It's a name that makes way more sense. We call them aubergines. Aubergines.
I feel like I've heard that. I think I saw that written down, but didn't know how to pronounce it.
That makes sense. It's a weird, but like that's, I don't know what came first, the color or the fruit, the vegetable. I'm not sure. But like that sort of rich purple color is also known as aubergine here. I don't know if you have that as a color name in the US as well.
That's obscure.
Oh, really? Okay, then, yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard of that being used. over here in a conversation at all.
In color or fruit, in color or vegetable.
Yeah. We just call it eggplants. Eggplant purple. If we want to talk about the color, but I think that something that has fascinated me is that names and personal culture words are so personal, and something that it just fascinates me. I don't know if you've ever heard of the television show called The Koala Brothers. It's big over here. It's an Australian show. It's the cutest thing. It's an older show, but the main characters are these two koala bears, and one of the brothers' names is Archie, but they're Australian, so they say Archie. And if they were to come over here to America or to England, they would be called Archie, and he would just say, "Yeah, that's my name."
Yeah.
But everybody at home calls him Archie. To him, his name is Archie, which is like, it's made me think of, if you meet somebody from Australia named Archie, should you be calling him Archie?
Yeah, should you be going out of your way? That's a really fascinating.
Yeah, like
you going out your way to pronounce it how it's been pronounced all their life.
Right, because even though they're speaking English, they're their own language and culture, really. Yeah, if I met somebody Spanish and they said, "Oh, my name is Alejandra," I would call them Alejandra. I wouldn't say, "Oh, hey, Alex." I'd say, "Hey, it's Alejandra," and that's Archie. And so what made me think about that is when you were saying that you say YouTube. Is that how you?
Yeah.
YouTube? And people in Australia add a WR to the end of no. Nor. Yeah. Like, there's neither of those letters are at the end of no, but that's their culture. That's how they say it.
Totally, and I think that is a great idea. The amount, especially, I know the US has all kinds of accents as well, but like accents are a real big deal here in the UK. Like, you can go go a mile and you've got a new accent in some parts of the UK. And there's often a debate, like especially like north and south, or south and southwest, or northwest and northeast here in the UK, especially England, about what's the correct way of speaking. And the amount of people who heard, like, "Oh, you said that wrong." Like, no, you didn't say it wrong. That's just enough. There's no right, like nothing in biology or nature goes, that's the correct way of speaking. That's such a human-made construct. I just did a video about accents, and I've met people in life. I don't know if you've ever had this. Has someone ever said to you they don't have an accent?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
No, like, you do have an accent.
Everyone has an accent. Everyone does.
The reason people would think they don't have an accent is because they have like their country standard accent, which in the UK, specifically England, is kind of what I have. It's a southeast accent. It's not quite how the Queen speaks. I'm still so used to saying the Queen, how the King. Yeah,
he's iconic.
That still take like 2 years on. I'm still getting used to that, like how the King speaks. Not everyone speaks that. It's more like how news reporters. Normally, when you look, I asked on my Facebook group and on my YouTube community tab, what is considered the standard accent of your country. Quite a few people responded with, "Oh, it's normally how news presenters speak. Is that kind of very easy to understand?" And it normally is associated with a specific geographic region of their respective countries. In the UK, it's the Southeast, and I'm from the Southeast. I lived most of my life in the Southeast. So a lot of people I know would be like, "Oh, I don't have an accent," because the accent they spoke with was deemed the standard compared to like a Scouse accent in Liverpool, or a Cornish accent down in Cornwall, down in the southwest. They just saw themselves as the default, which in their head equaled no accent, which is just silly. And I don't know if that's a similar sort of thing in the US, but I can't remember how we got to that part of the conversation, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, and then like to America, if you're uneducated about how diverse England is, you all sound the same to us.
Really?
But it's just you hear a British accent, you're like, yeah, that person's from England or that person's from Ireland or Scotland. But then the more, if you're interested in getting to know it, you can begin to say, oh, I think this person's from that part of England or that part of Ireland. You can begin to distinguish the accents. But I mean, I don't know if you guys in England pick up on the differences of the American accent. I think the American accent is as diverse as Scotland, Ireland, and England. Someone speaks in Maine is completely different than Texas, and it's wildly it's decidedly wildly different, and yet it's all America.
I think an average Brit would be able to do this might be judgment. I think there's probably 2 American accents an average Brit would know. That will be a standard American accent, kind of in the way you're speaking right now, and like a pan Southern accent of some description, probably close to Texan. But I think most Brits would know, be able to do that and that. I know a few more because of kind of what I do for a living. Like there's there's that strong New York accent, especially from the city, that Brooklyn kind of, I'm not even going to attempt to do it, a kind of strong New York Brooklyn accent, kind of like the Larry David accent, I guess, for a better example. Then you've got like a whole variety of Southern accents. You've got the Tennessee kind of drawl, the Louisiana accent, the Texan accent. You've got kind of Valley California accent, and then you've got kind of the stuff what I would call the Fargo accent in the north of the
Midwest. They're called Midwestern. Yeah
It's interesting because I actually early this year went to St. Louis to go see a friend, and I did kind of want to hear out because that's like atypical Midwest St. Louis, and I did try and see if I could really pick up on any unique accents, but to me, like my ears aren't trained well enough. I definitely sounded kind of like generic American to me, but that's probably my ears not being in tune.
Well, it's funny because being somebody from New York, if somebody from St. Louis said, well, I don't have a Midwestern accent, I'd be like, you do.
I guess that's once again because it's kind of like that whole idea of standard accents. Like even in specific parts of a country, there can be standard accents. Like the Midwest is a big kind of ambiguous part of the USA in many instances. Like not everyone agrees on what is Midwest, but like the standard Midwest accent has kind of been deemed by society, by film and TV, as myself just then as like the Fargo kind of accent. So, and not everyone in the Midwest has that accent. So they might think down in St. Louis, especially much more southern compared to North Dakota, Nebraska, up that kind of neck of the woods, their accents are incredibly different, but it still is a Midwest accent. It's just not the standard Midwest accent in the same way where someone from Liverpool still has an English accent, but not the quote unquote standard English accent. Yeah.
Well, and it's funny, the thing with the New York accent, I was just talking to somebody who moved out from Colorado, as they would say. And they were talking about the typical New York accent. And really, if you were to walk around and talk to people who are in the Bronx and Brooklyn and New York City, they kind of talk like me. I mean, you're going to get people going by say, hey, how are you doing? That's New York's way of saying, hey, I acknowledge you. You're a person. I hope you have a good day. But we both know we're not interested in chatting. Yeah. It's polite. It's short, but it's polite. Hey, how are you doing? Nobody is going to stop and give you a reply because that's not what that is about. No. Hey, how you doing? That's Italian. That's Italian. Yeah. That's not New York. That's like Italians in New York. So if you were to hear somebody say, hey, how you doing? They're Italian. And New York is so diverse with ethnicities that, I mean, you have Chinese people who are like third generation New Yorkers, and they don't say, hey, how you doing? But they're just as New York as all of the other ethnicities down there. So it's so fascinating how New York has become a stereotype that's a fraction of what New York actually is.
It's such a small part, but that's the part that I guess has made quite a big, especially cultural influence. And once again, going back to like accents in America, a lot of people see like the South Californian accent, especially non-Americans like myself. They'll see the South Californian accent as kind of the standard of America because that's where all the movies come from. That's where the TV shows come from. So that's the accent that we hear most on telly and at the cinema.
Yeah, which is so fun because that is just a California accent.
Yeah, but yeah, it's just interesting. It's so interesting how one tiny part of a country can come to represent the entirety of it in regards to how people sound from there. Where that's so easy, and that's not even going into stuff like you mentioned briefly with Chinese New Yorkers, going into different ethnicities. You know, ethnicities can be linked to a specific accents as well, and yeah, like the whole AAVE, African American Vernacular English, that's like a whole different, unique, amazing thing unto itself as well.
It is. And it's all connected. Like, I know I keep saying this, but like, it's just true. It's all connected. Language and culture and names and words are so layered. And I just find it so fascinating, and it is so important.
Yeah, but no, yeah, I'm happy to. That's been a real big tangent. I'm happy to talk about names in regards to baby names, that sort of thing. Like, if we want to chat about names once again, I would happily do that.
Well, I wanted to have you on because I've talked so much about baby names that I wanted to showcase that words, language, names are so much bigger than. They're bigger and yet they're not.
No.
Like it's what you do is like this bird's eye view, which I appreciate, and I feel like it's important because then by the time you get down to, I'm naming this person, you have a better understanding of how names and words have worked throughout humanity. Like, I just feel like it better equips you as a person.
Yeah, and that's what I've always enjoyed about it. So here's a fun fact I enjoyed. Do you know what the oldest human name we know of is?
Adam, right? I don't know.
So what is the oldest name that you have found that we recorded?
The oldest known name we have recorded is believed to be Kushim.
Kushim? How would you spell that?
It's Latinized into Kushim, I believe, Kushim. It must have been somewhere in Mesopotamia, way back during in the cradle of civilization. And it was no one's name. It wasn't a name, we believe, it wasn't the name of anyone in particular. I think it was just an accountant. We have like an old tablet, a stone tablet, and I think it was some sort of bank statement or accountancy statement type thing, and it has the name Kushim on it. And from what we can gather from how old that is, that's the oldest recorded human name that we know of. And I think that's so cool and it kind of shows how like names are for everyone. You'd think the oldest known name would be some sort of mighty king or ruler, etched into history forever. But no, it was just an average guy, an average Joe, an average Kushim, I suppose.
That's interesting. I didn't know.
No, I thought I made a video on it a very long time ago now. And a lot of my video sort of production ideas, people ask, how do you get your ideas for videos? And a lot of them kind of just come to me, or they'll be inspired by really odd, silly things. I was reading a non-fiction book at the moment called White Teeth, not about names or language at all, but there was something mentioned in it. It was talking about the reunification of Germany, because it was a book set through the 70s to 90s. And there's a part of it talking about the reunification of Germany after the Cold War. And that got me thinking, Germany was two countries. Yeah, I forget Germany was two countries. What was language like in East and West Germany? So that kind of inspired that video. And yeah, I just randomly had this idea. What could be a fun idea? Like often I think, what's the something name? Like, what's the oldest name? And that kind of how that one came about. So it's not something it's definitely not common knowledge. The average person doesn't know what the oldest name is. But it's one of those sort of weird ideas. I thought that it's one of these things, going back to how we began, like interesting little facts that you can probably engage people with who probably aren't into names. I think even someone who had no care about language or words or names would probably get some degree of interest of being like, that is interesting.
I agree. There are so many cool facts that are introduced through the name, but really your book is so much bigger than names too.
Thank you.
It's really, really enjoyable, like finding out about the origin of mayonnaise. And
yes, that's one of my favorites. Thank you, Alex. That is one of my favorite etymologies out there, the mayonnaise one.
Well, can you share it?
Yeah. So what's really interesting about this one is that, I'll explain the name there, so why I got such a personal kick out of it. So mayonnaise comes from a city called Mahon on an island that is now Spanish. I can't remember which one. Spain has a lot of islands. And Mahon was supposedly named after Mago Barca. So Mago Barca was the brother of Hannibal Barca, who during the Second Punic War against Rome in the 1st or 2nd century BC, I believe. I can't remember the dates, but there's this Rome had this big rivalry with another empire called Carthage. There's 3 Punic Wars, the second one being the most known of them. The iconic image of the Second Punic War is Hannibal, because even though he was in Carthage, which is modern day Tunisia, Tunisia's here, Italy's there, but you can't, because Rome had control of the sea during the 1st century, during the First Punic War even, they couldn't just sail over. They had to go from North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula, over the Alps and into Rome. And they took elephants over the Alps. And that's just wild. That's like the signature image of Hannibal Barca and his brother Mago taking elephants. My hair
that had to be quite the sight. Yeah, it had to be quite the sight.
Yeah. But so anyway, Hannibal lost.
These elephants were like, this is bogus.
Yeah. Why am I in the Alps right now? I'm an elephant.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be here. But like Hannibal lost that war for a whole variety of reasons. But his brother Mago, did he go into exile or did he just retreat? So his brother Mago retreated. He founded this city of Mahon in now modern Spain, and Mahon ended up creating this sauce, this egg-based sauce that got really popular around the world, especially in the Netherlands. They love their mayonnaise in the Netherlands. I love mayonnaise in the Netherlands. That's a weird tangent. I just really love chips, as we say over here, with mayonnaise. So, and that's like the main food of the Netherlands.
Americans do not. We'll pretend to do vinegar. We'll do sometimes chips or French fries and vinegar. But if you were to come over here and put mayonnaise on our French fries, we'd be like,
my country. When
Get out.
You probably
your tea and your mayonnaise and get out of here.
You've never had to experience coming into the USA as a non-citizen, I imagine. But actually, when you go through airport customs, they take your fingerprints and whatnot, and then they ask you, "Are you going to put mayonnaise on any French fries?" And you have to actually put your hand on the Bible and say, "I declare I'm not going to put any mayonnaise on." And they let you in.
I understand this.
Yeah, you probably didn't know about that, but that's what they actually do. But no, so ultimately, the name of mayonnaise comes from the name of the brother or like a warrior from one of ancient history's most celebrated wars. I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, I need to tell it. Like you hear, I need to tell everyone about that. Everyone needs to know how fun it is. Yeah,
somehow it made mayonnaise so much cooler. And you didn't think that was possible. And I think the person who invented Worcestershire sauce just hated people.
You did really good just then.
I had to really think about, though, how to say it. I was like, Worcestershire sauce.
Worcestershire.
But then also you said something in your book that I was like, wait, what? I grew up with horses. I love horses. I have a horse. I did not know that bidets were named after some extinct French pony.
They are,
I was
aren't
like,
they?
What?
Once again, I wrote this book a very long time ago, but you're very right. Yes, that's a really bizarre one, and it comes.
Maybe I should rephrase this. A fact that you might not know is that did you know that bidets are named after extinct French ponies? You should put that in your next book. I just found it randomly on the internet.
Just randomly.
Unnamed source.
Well,
I thought that was so fascinating and also unfortunate on so many levels.
Does it come from the idea of straddling them?
Yes.
Yeah.
I should do a whole video about words that derive from horses and ponies, I guess. I've done a video
Good. I would love
years ago. I've done a video years ago now, kind of breaking down what all the different horse names mean. Like what counts as a pony. If they've been castrated, they have different names. If they're breedable, they have different names, like stallions and geldings. What the different mixes are called. Like you get a mule from a male and female, different like things, or a
That's my low-key pet peeve, Patrick, is when people say, "Oh, I've got this filly that I'm riding," and I'm like, "You don't ride fillies because fillies are babies. You're riding a mare." And not every foal is a colt.
Yes.
It's just a foal. A colt is a boy.
Yeah.
Something I didn't even know before I made that video about horse names was that ponies and horses, they're the same animal. They're not like, it's not like lions and tigers or like two animals that look alike but are different species. That's what I'm looking for. Horses, like literally any horse that is below a certain height is a pony, isn't it? And that's all it takes.
Well, yes and no. So if you had the American Morgan horse is America's first breed of horse, and it's my favorite horse. There are Morgan horses that are pony size, but they're still horse because they are anatomically a horse. So you have like miniature horses, which are very small horses. And then pony is like a generic term, but then it is also a breed, because if you look at like the Shetland ponies, they have more cartoonish features, like the Icelandics. They don't really look like horses. They look a little bit more like ponies. They have just a bigger cartoonish dimensions.
Yeah,
it's one of those terms that are quite ambiguous. Like, what even is a pony? It can do to size, it can do to features. It might even it can even be due to connotations. Like, it might even be things like if you saw a young girl riding. I don't know if they're catch-all to. If you saw a young girl riding a horse, you might be more inclined to say, "Oh, look, she's riding a pony," as opposed to she's riding a horse. Or if you saw like a cow, you wouldn't ever really describe a cowboy as riding a horse, even if that horse was a pony by other definitions. It's got like a social aspect to it as well.
Yeah. So pony is kind of a size, it's kind of a breed, and also kind of a term of endearment. Like it's like another word for darling. Like, "Hey, darling," or "Hey, this is my pony." But it's probably not a pony. It's probably a quarter horse, you know?
A lot of people have this image. It seems to be the general consensus that language and the study of language and linguistics is this very dry, boring topic.
Yeah, I've always scratched my head about that. Because if, I'm sitting at my Thanksgiving table and talking to family, and I bring up names, like nobody in that room is going, yeah, exactly. And everybody sitting there has a name and has probably named at least one person in their life. And I've been like, how come it's just not more normal to talk about these things? It's so important and so fascinating.
Yeah. Like, and they're all like, names are like literally everything has a name.
That's why I think having these types of conversations, I think, are important to bring awareness of the importance of it. Like, it's actually, this is where the cool kids are sitting.
Yeah,
like, totally. It's really cool over here. You should just come sit for a few minutes. Even if that's not your thing, we're cool. Come sit with us.
At the back of the bus, smoking our cigarette. Like, so yeah, do you want to hear this really cool name? That's what we talk about. So,
if we're on the cool bus, where can people come find you?
Yeah, okay. People can find me on YouTube, Name Explain. This is going to sound really arrogant, but if you just search Name Explain onto Google, I appear.
I'm kind of a big deal, so if you just type in Name Explain on YouTube, you're going to find my channel.
You're going to find me. I found out recently I was on famousbirthdays.com, which is hilarious. Find me on
That's awesome. I hope you printed that out and framed it. Side note, you need to take a picture of your famous birthdays, print it out, and send it to all of your friends and family and say, just in case you forgot when my birthday is, make checks payable too.
So yeah, if you want to find me anywhere on the internet, aside from famousbirthdays.com. YouTube is the best place for it. That's why I'm most active. Just search Name Explain. I will appear. So on Instagram, I'm Name Explain YT for YouTube. So literally not YT as in like my skin tone, YT is in the letters. On Instagram, I kind of have Instagram as my focus is like my personal sort of stuff. I don't really talk about names on there, I'm afraid, or anything like that. I don't talk about language there. I just share aspects of what's going on in my life and my day-to-day beings. If you want to know who Patrick the Human is, however, if you do want to talk actual words and names and language with me, that's what the Facebook group is for. I have a Facebook group called Friends of Name Explain, and all kinds. Yeah, it's really fun. There's all kinds of really fun people on there. People share articles, people post questions about language and words and names on there. Every now and then, if I need some help for a video I'm making, I'll reach out to people on there. It's kind of like my go-to spot to interact with viewers of Name Explain. I'm also on Patreon. If people want to be awesome and donate on Patreon, that is the best way to help support Name Explain. Monthly donations are amazing on there. You get extra goodies, you get ad-free videos, you get to help shape what videos get covered in the future. I do like polls saying, hey, what video should I do? I take suggestions on there. Patreon is, patreon.com/Name Explain. That would be great as well. And you can find my books, The Origins of Names, Words, and Everything in Between, volumes 1 and 2, in most places you buy books from. There's the big one beginning with an A, where, you can buy books from there. Go find it at a fun independent bookshop. I think there's a website called bookstore.com, which is connected to lots of independent bookstores, and they'll connect you one another. So go buy it from there if you want to go help a local bookshop as well. They're available in different formats. Alex, you were saying just then you were listening on Audible. The Audible editions are great, aren't they? How good is Jonathan Cowley, the guy who narrates it?
Yeah, I loved it. Audible has saved my life because I love reading, and I don't have the physical energy or time to sit down in my life and read a book now.
Yeah,
I just listen to it everywhere
while listening to a book. It's great.
Yeah, it's my favorite app outside of Instagram. Thank you so much. I've appreciated this conversation, and be sure to check out Matthew, aka Patrick Foote, on all of his Name Explain, and see you next time. Okay.
Yeah.